the sustainable buildings front is something I know of tangentially through some of the work that I've done. And when I do go down to London, I always find it quite interesting when I can see companies' buildings from the top floor window which I'm at, and I know they've made lots of pronouncements on net zero and the like. And then I'll
Yeah.
just see a crane or some kind of bulldozer coming along and just knocking down the top couple of floors, or just knocking down the building because they've leased it to someone else and they're building something new.
Yeah.
These glass and steel structures that constantly get recycled, and this the mode of design which you talked about, it strikes me as being utterly wasteful. And I can't help but think of a couple of more conservative voices that I've come across that have always stuck with me. So Roger Scruton made a point in one of his books, might have even been in a book called Green Philosophy, where he was trying to recapture the green movement for, small c conservatism.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he basically said the ironic thing is these buildings, which are supposedly unsustainable because they're made out of stone, are still standing, and
Exactly.
they can be repurposed and they're multiple use. Whereas often these glass and steel structures are made for single use, and whoever moves into them after doesn't want to use them, and they've got to be replaced 30, 40 years at a time. And to add on to that, there was this quote which I remember underlining loads, and I keep on thinking about it every time I'm walking through terrible cityscapes. And it's a John Ruskin quote, and he gave it in a speech to a bunch of the financiers and business people of Bradford when they just built the transport exchange, I think, or some kind of exchange. And the quote was this: "When we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight, nor for present use alone. Let it be such work as our descendants will thank us for. And let us think, as we lay stone on stone, that a time is to come when those stones will be held sacred, because our hands have touched them, and that men will say, as they look upon the labour and wrought substance of them, see, this is our fathers, this is what they did for us." And I don't know if you ever see that kind of let's build forever mentality, but does it exist?
Oh, it's a very good question. Does it exist? Does it still exist is the question.
This idea of being a steward, trying to pass something on down the ages.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what, people are when they're custodians, stewards of listed buildings. No one really owns a listed building. I think, so building from scratch now, would I say that architects have that mentality? Some. I would say some. But what's very interesting is those who do, I'm thinking of the likes of Ben Pentreath or Adam Architecture, those types of architectural consultancies and firms. They are so influenced. They're so very influenced. And I wouldn't say they imitate, but they're very much founded on the principles of when architecture was seen as the sort of the pinnacle of architecture. So I'm thinking the Georgian era, perhaps slightly the medieval era, but largely they tend to imitate the Georgian era. Not in a pastiche way, but they certainly aren't creating glass steel boxes that we see today. They are trying to create, stone, brick, stucco, etc., with beautiful porticos and sash windows and those sorts of things. They're not creating the green buildings that we're supposedly building today. So I think that's really interesting. And even, Ben Pentreath, his firm has created, new model streets, model towns. And again, you would think that they were built in the 18th or 19th century. So that's very interesting, is that actually, if we're building something to last, we're inspired by the past, not modern architecture. So I think that tells you everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, our king, he's become known for building new towns like Poundbury, for example, which have just been absolutely so popular. And I know lots of portions of the media were decrying it as some kind of pastiche project, but people love them. People want to live in them of all stripes and all classes. And what's I've been bemused about recently is, May 2024, when we're recording this, is there's planning permission being sought for 2,500 homes in Faversham and Kent, much in the Poundbury style of the Georgian facades, the things that we, the reason why everyone goes walking down something like Notting Hill to have their Instagram taken all the time, they want to be around beautiful buildings. People are drawn to them. And yet we've got such a NIMBY culture. It's like, I can maybe understand if no one wants a prison next to them. But when you're building such beautiful buildings, I don't get it. I say, King Charles, make him the building and housing czar for the country, and would be in a much better place.
I would agree with you. And that's the case. I can understand the sort of NIMBY culture if it's a box, if they're putting a load of boxes behind, because I think that's, why do you need other boxes? Why not create beautiful houses? We did it for so many centuries, and it does seem to have sort of fallen off. Why? Particularly when we are moving towards more sustainable housing and all that sort of thing, is we could be creating really well designed houses, and we don't seem to, or buildings at least, we don't seem to. But I think you're right, and we do see beauty in the past. We do see beauty in the architecture from pretty much every century apart from our own, I would argue.
Yeah. And I mean, I've got my own thoughts about that, but I don't think they're too different from John Ruskin. Again, he said in the 19th century, and for those who don't know him, he's an art critic amongst other things. He's a bit of a polymath, and he believed in that period when people were building all these big exchanges in just a bit of a build them high, build them cheap kind of style, that it was the loss of vitality through a Christian culture that was leading to it, that we didn't have the same vitality as we saw pushing us through the medieval period. And I guess my question to you, and this was driven by a comment I'd had from one of the viewers, who said there's a great difference in viewing oneself as the temple of the Holy Spirit or thinking of oneself as an evolved ape. The latter view is not going to draw forth great architecture, art, music, or anything else.